Good afternoon and welcome back to Round the Table. I hope you're doing well today. I'm Ben John from Christian Concern. It's a delight to be back with you for this week's episode of Round the Table. Big announcements this week, and so delighted to talk about it with Tim Dieppe and Paul Huxley.
Hey, Ben.
Hi, Tim. Hi, Paul. As we discuss, it's always great to hear from where you are and your comments, your concerns. Already great to see some of you already putting your comments in. Hi, Martinus. Hi, Carol Donaldson. We will be addressing some of these questions this afternoon. Tim, big announcement this week. General election called 4th of July. First thoughts, how can Christians be thinking about the general election?
Yes, so a bit of a surprise for people, I think, and Sunak made his announcement on was it Tuesday? No, it was Wednesday, wasn't it? I think. Yes, we've got an election coming on July the 4th. Very exciting. Lots to play for in the coming 6 weeks, it's a real opportunity for Christians to get their voice heard. You know, all these candidates want your vote, so don't give it away cheaply. You know, that's kind of part of my point here. All these candidates want your vote. They're going to come to you and ask you. They'll probably knock on your door. They're going to send leaflets around to you. They're going to come to hustings events. Get your church to host a husting event, or a church near you to host a hustings event, to put them on the hotspot, ask them questions about things that matter to Christians, things that matter to us, and see where they stand and see what they're like. And you know, don't give your vote away cheaply is kind of part of what we're saying here on this. And the election being called did surprise people, did shock people, and it's meant that Parliament has been prorogued and will be disillusioned next week, and a whole load of parliamentary business had to be scrapped as a result. Now, much of this is good news for us, because as you probably know, we're very concerned about amendments to the Criminal Justice Bill, which was set to be debated again now on June the 4th. That has all gone completely by the wayside, which means that the amendments to decriminalise abortion and also an amendment to criminalise conversion therapy have been scrapped, and they are dead, and they've failed, and they're not progressing. And a new government will have to come in and start all over again if they want to do a criminal justice bill, or not do one if they don't want to do one, whatever. But the imminent threat of those amendments, which was very real at the time, has gone away. So that's a bit of good news for the election. Things that I'm disappointed about is I was really hoping the government, you may remember, put out draft guidance on gender questioning children and issued a consultation, which we responded to and encouraged our supporters to respond to. And the government hasn't responded to that consultation, and therefore hasn't finalised that into formal guidance as yet, which I hope they would do before an election, but that hasn't happened. And also, they've just launched a consultation on RSE, sex education. I understand the consultation will continue, and that is due to finish on the 11th of July. But again, this is draft guidance, which is definitely an improvement, but we won't get to full guidance. And a new government might change it, or whatever might happen with that. So nothing's happening with that. So all these things, everything comes to a sudden stop in Parliament, and bills that are quite close to being finished, like the Criminal Justice Bill, just get completely curtailed, and any new government would have to start again completely under new Parliament with all that kind of stuff. That's what
even the smoking ban that they're talking about, which he said he wanted to get through on Wednesday, even that's not happening now. So it just shows you how little they've sort of been able to get done in a way. Yeah,
everything just gets scrapped and stalled and stopped, and it all focuses on the election. Parliament stops sitting, and they're all going to be focused on getting your votes and trying to get you to vote for them. And so, watch this space, because we're going to be following the election very, very closely. We're going to be analysing each of the election manifestos and seeing what commitments they're making or not on any of our issues, particularly interested in pro-life issues, euthanasia, how much that comes into manifestos, conversion therapy, whether that gets into manifestos, transgenderism, does that get into manifestos? Anything about free speech, does that get into manifestos? Be very interesting to see. They may just avoid talking about these subjects, but there will be pressure in some parties to say something about some of these things. And then there's Islam as well. Do they say anything about that? Anything about Islamophobia and a definition of it? Stuff like that. So these things are very concerning, and be very interesting to see what actually gets into the manifestos when they come out in the coming weeks. We've also got in mind 10 key priorities for policies to ask your candidates about and pressure the parties about around the kind of issues I've mentioned. But we're going to be bringing out stuff about those in the coming weeks as well. So, be a very interesting time, it always is. And it'd be interesting as well to see and pray. Do be praying about this election, because it really is, anything could happen. The polls say one thing, but the polls have been wrong a lot in the past, at recent times around elections. It's all to play for. And who knows what can happen in terms of, nobody believed that Brexit was going to happen, and it happened. And even on the night, Nigel Farage conceded defeat, and then it came through, didn't it? Lots of factors come to play. Whatever happens in the news will affect the election. You can imagine a particular news event comes, all the candidates, major parties have to comment on it. In God's providence, we'll see what news events come up. But there could be news events relating to our issues very easily that come up. We've got cases coming up that could end up being in the news, and candidates and politicians have to comment on them. Do you think this is right? Do you think this should happen to people? Should people really have to put up with this kind of, restriction of free speech in the workplace, or transgender stuff happening, or whatever it might be? So it'd be very interesting to see what happens, and just do be praying about it, because lots of things can influence and swing an election, and there's lots of things that are unpredictable. We don't know, but God does know what's going to happen.
And we've seen so much of that over the last 5 years, haven't we? Because, Boris Johnson gets in as Prime Minister at the end of 2019. And then 2020, we have the COVID, everything. Yep. And that takes out basically the entire plan for what they were intending to do. God intervened in that way. Obviously, it's a worldwide thing. It was much wider than that particular issue, but, it had such a big impact on what happened. And then, just as we were getting out of that, then Ukraine happened, all of the things related to that invasion. And obviously, it just didn't. Also, just very recently, of course, Nicola Sturgeon, resigned because of, she was pushing for self-ID, and then there was this male trans prisoner, and everyone thought, no, you can't possibly just say this person can self-identify as a woman and therefore go into female prison, and it basically caused her downfall. So news items like this can totally swing what happens in an election, absolutely swing it and change things. And we don't know what's going to happen. God does know, but we can pray about it and see. And I do want to engage with some of the comments here that are coming up. Nicole Hawkins says, I feel as if there's no one half decent to vote for. And Heather Scammell as well, unless there's a really good independent candidate, I intend to spoil my ballot. Well, listen, I sympathise with people saying this. There's been a lot of discussion about that in the office and around generally in politics. The Conservatives don't seem to be Conservative anymore. Who is there? Who's standing up for Christian values? I think that obviously the Reform Party, in terms of the major parties, has been gaining a lot of votes. Or polling higher, and did do quite well, I think, in the May local elections, because people are fed up with the mainstream parties. I think we could see quite a lot of no-shows. I think we could see a low turnout because people are fed up with politics, which means your vote counts more than it might do otherwise. And I also think there will be protest votes, people voting for reform, but there's also, let's not forget, various other parties like the Heritage Party. Let's not forget the Christian People's Alliance as well, which might be worthy of your vote. And there may be other independent candidates who stand as well that may be worth a protest vote. And the protest votes make a difference, don't they? I mean, UKIP, forced Cameron to promise a referendum. I mean, that was what this protest party did. So, there is that kind of protest vote. There's scope for that potentially, depending where you are. Obviously in your constituency, you need to look at the candidates. There are some very, very good candidates and MPs that we'd want to support. And there's some very, very bad ones as well that we want to get out at all costs if we can, and support whoever has the best chance of getting them out. And then there are, I'm sure, constituencies where there's no good candidates and you may want to do a protest vote or something like that.
So all these factors to play for in this, and all these things to consider.
Paul, what do you think?
Well, I'd be interested to hear people in the comments, a bit more what they think about voting for a candidate versus voting for a particular party. I'm very much on the side of vote for the candidate. Try and find out exactly what the people who you actually have the opportunity to directly vote for actually believe and how they're going to act. Because there is a difference between different Conservative prospective MPs and between different prospective MPs for all kinds of parties. And I've voted all kinds of different ways in previous elections because of that, because I think that some candidates are just worth supporting despite their party or as independents as well. And who is actually standing, who you're actually voting for really matters to me, because they are the people who actually cast the votes on all the issues that we actually deal with. At Christian Concern, a vote, we were going to possibly see a vote on decriminalising abortion. That's not being led by Rishi Sunak or Keir Starmer or anyone else from the top of the party, but it's decided on the votes of actual people who are representing you in your constituency. So I'd really encourage people to get involved that way and think first about their candidates. But I'd love to see other people's comments and thoughts about that.
Yeah, great to see the comments here. So Heather Scampbell writing, I look for personal integrity, someone who puts constituency above party, and some party manifestos I cannot support, so won't vote for their candidates. Nicole Hawkins responding to Paul, I vote for the candidate. I've tried to interact with my MP regarding issues in my area and it's been difficult, so therefore I will not be giving her another chance. Well, great. Nicole.
Well, that's a good point, isn't it? Because if you've been writing to your MP, as we've encouraged you to do, about things like the abortion amendments and various other things as well, if they're responding to you and paying attention to you and then they might deserve your vote, and if they're not, they might not. I mean, yes, and or if they're responding and saying I disagree with you, whatever, so that's a good point. How do they respond when you write to them?
Yeah. And that's why I think it's worth thinking about the importance of voting. It is important to vote. I think it's a useful thing to do, but we have 5 years between most general elections, and we have all kinds of things we can do during those periods. And in the end, your vote can be your judgment on how that MP that you've been writing to, talking to, lobbying for those 5 years, how they have actually behaved. It's a final kind of judgment on them and perhaps the other candidates in your area. But it's got to be off the back of engagement throughout the years.
No, absolutely. Yep. And I guess, how do we, as Christians, elections are important, but God's still sovereign, whoever gets elected. How can we get the right balance between elections are important, but they're not all important? What's the right balance there, Tim?
Well, obviously not all important, Ben. God is the only all important thing in the universe. So we should worship Him and so on. But we should pay attention to politics, and the election. We do live in a democracy, and we should make use of that right that we have to make a difference and vote, and to also to question our candidates and ask them what they think, and ask them what they believe, and ask them what they would vote on certain issues and so on, and see how they answer to it. And it's a great privilege to be able to live in a democracy and have these kind of rights and so on. So we should make use of them, and pay attention to it, and listen to what people are saying, and I think, and pray about it as well. And I think all these things need to be done by Christians and others. Really, anybody living in democracy has a responsibility, I think, to basically pay some attention to politics and have some decision about who to vote for and where to vote. I think it's kind of it's part of being a responsible citizen living in a democratic constitution.
It's quite difficult, isn't it, as a Christian, though, because you might well have candidates who in your area who are, every candidate in one particular constituency might fully support abortion up to birth, or kind of have some kind of view which, as a Christian, we'd say just that's not acceptable for anyone to hold, who's representing the people. We might feel very strongly about a particular issue, and then we might be in a situation where we go, can I really lend any support to any of these candidates in my area if they hold a position which I think is that evil or that wrong?
But you're bound to. I mean, at the end of the day, Paul, isn't there also a least worst option sometimes in these things? I mean, one of some of your candidates might actually want abortion up to birth, but unlikely to be all of them, right?
Yeah, it is, but I think some Christians struggle with this particular point because they see it as they're lending their support to that particular person. That person doesn't deserve my support. I've got to opt out, and there's a sort of purist mentality about it. I sort of do go for the situation where you've got an opportunity to nudge the needle in one direction slightly, or further away from a worse situation, and that it's a useful thing to vote. So I don't take that purist approach, but I do understand how Christians get to that place and feel that way. If we had, if you had a situation where everyone was, to take a favorite example, was pro-Hitler, for example. So all of the candidates were were saying that I'm for a Nazi regime or for Adolf Hitler, then I think we'd feel like we can't possibly support that at all. How can I?
No, and there is a case. There is a case. I've had the case made to me that abortion is like the biggest issue in the world, and therefore, why would you vote on anything else? And you can't possibly ever lend your support to any candidate who supports abortion. And I don't entirely agree with that, but I'm close to agreeing with it. I mean, I think it's it's a fair point, isn't it? How can you vote for somebody who thinks it's fine to kill babies in the womb, and how can you do that? So I strongly sympathise with that view. I don't quite hold to it entirely myself. I think there are other issues as well that are also very, very important. But there is a strong case to be made that unless you can vote for a candidate who won't support abortion, why would you vote? I mean, I get what you're saying, Paul.
I think we need to we just can vote for the least worst option. I think that can end up meaning that the window just keeps the Overton window of politics just continues to shift and shift and shift, because they take for granted that maybe conservative Christians will vote a particular way, and because they aren't as bad as everyone else, in one sense, so much bad has happened under the Conservatives.
Well, this is where other alternative parties hold them to account a bit, don't they? And Reform is kind of holding the Conservatives to account at the moment, and UKIP did before, or Independents might hold them to account as well. And so we will see. It's going to be really interesting. And whatever happens, the other thing to note, there'll be lots of new MPs this coming Parliament. When we get a new Parliament, loads and loads of new MPs, because lots of the current group are standing down, and then there'll be all the MPs who lose their seats as well. So lots and lots of new MPs. Really worth praying for a good intake of new MPs, some of whom we really hope are strong, committed Christians. The likes, you think of Miriam Cates and the difference that she has made as just one MP with Christian convictions who decided to stand up, stand very boldly up against transgenderism and against sexualization of children in schools, and made a massive difference. It is amazing what one MP can do if they decide, I'm going to just take hold of these issues and really run with it. And as she has done, and she just came in 2019 as a complete newcomer, and she's made a difference, and her majority is only a few thousand, I think, up in Yorkshire, and one of the Red Wall MPs. So be very interesting to see whether she keeps her seat, and whether we get other people like that coming in the new intake in July.
Well, much to pray for. Keep an eye out on all the resources that Christian Concern are going to be putting out. As you said to Tim, we'll be analysing all the manifestos, highlighting some of the key policy asks that Christians should be asking for, and prayerful wisdom as we seek to engage positively in these next few weeks. But yes, it is exciting. Well, I guess this week it's been announced that Anthony Stevens, councillor Anthony Stevens, has launched a formal complaint to the Independent Office for Police Conduct after officers threatened to storm a council building and arrest him if he planned to attend a committee meeting. So this is an elected local councillor from Wellingborough, a Conservative councillor, who was arrested for standing in support of another Christian Concern client, Councillor King Lawal, who was almost expelled from the Conservative Party, placed under investigation for tweets saying pride is sin. Anthony Stevens, not a Christian, stood with King Lawal, and the police came to his house, arrested him in front of his family, held him for hours, and said he's banned from going to council meetings, and actually said he's not fit to be a councillor. This is the police saying this about someone just because of their tweets, which they were accused him of being public order offences. He's launching a formal complaint with the support of Christian Concern because the police actually said they accused him of an alleged hate crime, and he was told that he was not a fit person to be a councillor, and that he should be removed from office, being accused of inciting racial hatred. They arrived unannounced at Councillor Stevens' home, and perhaps one of the most shocking and alarming aspects of this story was he was threatened and told not to go to the media to talk about this. He had an interview scheduled with GB News on Free Speech Nation, and GB News cancelled the interview after being contacted by the police. So this was a man, a councillor, standing in support with another, and other tweets as well, arrested, accused of hate crimes, public order offences, and told he wasn't allowed to talk to the media about it, and was deemed unfit to be a councillor by the police, not by the local community that had elected him, but by the police. And so we're supporting him with challenging this. I already see Carol Donaldson's comment there. Talk about a police state. Indeed. And Nicole Hawkins, this is extremely alarming. Indeed. Shocking, in fact. And this isn't a Christian. This is, I think he describes himself as a free speech extremist, or a free speech libertarian, or so to speak. And yet being arrested by the police because of it. A few months later, the police did inform him that they've dropped all the charges, but not after all of this intimidation tactics and very harmful behaviors towards him. Tim, what's your first thoughts about all of this?
Yes. I mean, it's very, very disturbing that the police are so heavy-handed about a little tweet, that he did, and then they come in and honestly, they just really do seem to believe they're a law unto themselves, don't they? I mean, they come in and make up what the law says. I mean, and say he can't attend a meeting as a councillor, which he's elected to do, and things like this. I mean, it is absolutely crazy. And I'm glad he's making a complaint to the police about it with our help. And I really hope the police are very apologetic about this and really say this absolutely should not have happened. I mean, I really hope that's what happens. But it's very concerning that it seems like there are increasing numbers of police officers who sort of tend to believe that they're above the law and that they can just go and silence people. If somebody said something that somebody else regards as offensive, it's not even a breach of the law. When he hasn't, they've dropped all charges. They never tried to even convict him in the end because they recognise there's no actual offence that he's done. But they sort of, these police officers believe that if somebody says something politically incorrect, they're within their rights to go and arrest them in front of wife and children and so on, and take it and threaten them and intimidate them and say you can't do this, you can't do that. And Stephen, fortunately was a relatively robust character, able to stand up to this, and had other people behind him as well who are willing to stand up to it. But you can imagine many other people be very intimidated by what the police did and what the police said. And the police have got to issue a formal, proper apology and maybe even conversation as well, I think, for Anthony Stevens around this. And we need to find a stop to it, because we just cannot be, this is not what a free country looks like, when the police come and threaten you in that kind of way for something you've said.
No, and sadly, it just seems to be increasingly common about this kind of checking your thinking. And I think with the exact details of this, there had been some correspondence between the police and the local Labour Party, who are the ones that actually made the complaints about Anthony Stevens. Paul, what should Christians think about this? How can we be speaking into this?
Well, one other thing that's funny about this is that one of the other tweets that he posted was of another Christian Concern client, street preacher Olawale Ilasanmi, who was arrested outside Southgate tube station himself some years ago. And the police behaved in a pretty funny way then as well, kind of changing their story about what actually happened, and making Olawale out to be not truthful when he in fact was the one who's being truthful. So this is not an isolated incident. I think the scary thing is actually the idea that Christians might self-censor and stop talking about these things completely, because they fear that the police might get involved, or they might get into trouble at work for saying things that are truthful and good and ultimately kind, like being against pride, for example, like King Lawal did. The danger really is us being silent. Now, sometimes putting stuff out on Twitter, on X, on Facebook, these venues is where it's most likely to be seen by enemies and people who are actually trying to cause trouble for Christians. And sometimes actually talking to real people in real life about these things is actually a much more helpful thing, because you can have a proper conversation about it and explain your views better. But what's really important, I think, is that we don't get, we have to challenge the police for acting like this. But at the same time, we have to say to Christians, look, it's really important that we exercise the freedoms that we do have, and we're continuing to be courageous about speaking for Jesus.
No, absolutely. Well, we'll be standing and continuing to speak and engaging, and the details of the case been put into the comments there. So I encourage you to read and share. It's shocking, but absolutely we need to be speaking and standing. Paul, on these various issues, there is pressure to be silent, and I gather a challenge is taking place against the display of pride flags in London. Tell us about that.
That's right, Ben. So many of you will have seen on the internet in the last few years some massive displays of pride flags down Regent Street in London, one of the top shopping streets in London. Beautiful architecture, churches, flagship stores of Apple and Microsoft and all these sorts of things. And just loads of Progress Pride flags, they're called, draped down where there might normally be Union Jacks or other kinds of decorations. These are set to come back this June to mark Pride Month. And we at Christian Concern don't want to see that happen. And we think it's wrong. So we are actually challenging it. Some lawyers are writing letters of objection to the planning permission, which is required for these flags to be shown. Now, but one of the interesting things about this is the actual flag that's being shown. I think we can bring up a photo of the actual picture that was mocked up in the application to show these flags and have them up, because they need to actually apply for planning application for these displays. And as you can see, it's not just the 6-color rainbow flag, which is a problem in itself. The rainbow flag promotes this idea that that anything goes when it comes to sexuality. Whatever kind of sexual feelings you have towards other people, that's all fine. That's all good. That's all good here. And it sends that kind of message that anyone who objects to that isn't welcome in that area. But sorry, could we bring that back up again? But these ones add this extra element, these black, brown, blue, pink, and white chevrons digging into that. which adds various groups to that message of sexual inclusivity, if you like. Includes people of brown and black kind of ethnic heritage. They've got the blue and pink transgender side of things as well. And I don't quite understand how, but it's meant to represent people who've been lost through AIDS and these sorts of things as well. So it's adding various groups to that sexuality rainbow as well. And, you know, there are extra reasons to object to that, because lots of people of ethnic minorities don't want to be associated in the first place with LGBT causes, with pride causes. But also the transgender movement, which is being outlined there in particular, you know, is one that lots of people have very good reasons to object to. Even people who this flag is meant to represent, of sort of LGBT identifying people, many of them object to the trans side of things because they see what damage it has done to children. And we've had the CAS review recently, and all these kind of people realizing how that transgender movement has really caused problems for people and is actually damaging. And so this particular flag, more even than the 6-color rainbow flag, is really divisive. It is not something that should be shown on, displayed in this kind of way on such an important street. And so we've actually started a petition now to support our cause, to tell Westminster City Council this shouldn't go ahead. And the point isn't just about Westminster and London, although it is actually very significant there because it will go around the internet a lot, and it's just kind of an iconic place where these flags would be shown. But it isn't just about that, because there are lots of opportunities to follow up with local councils and other things that might be going on with June, and we want to help you do that. So really love you to sign our petition to tell Westminster City Council that they should not be flying these flags.
Fantastic. Yeah.
Tim, how do the flags make you feel walking around Regent Street, Oxford Street?
Honestly, I think it's actually very oppressive. I mean, it's like, you know, here is this powerful symbol of transgender identity, transgenderism, LGBT ideology and stuff. And it's like, you know, there's so many of these flags. It's kind of dominates the whole space. You can't look anywhere without seeing these flags, and it just feels very, very oppressive, and it feels very much like, you know, this is a idol, really, an idol in our society, and one that you're forced to bow down to or recognize or see everywhere around the place. And we fly these flags to this idol of identity politics, or, you know, define your own identity kind of thing, and you know, and idol of sexual immorality, basically. And many people have said this. Lots and lots of commentators and journalists, including LGBT identifying journalists, have said, you know, this is crazy. These flags, they're so oppressive. It just looks like a kind of police state, or, you know, you've mentioned Nazism already once, you know, but, you know, it's a bit like living in a Nazi era with Nazi flags everywhere. This is these Pride Progress flags everywhere. And and you know, it's like you have to bow down to it, and you have to conform to it. And if you don't, the police will come and get you, as we were just hearing earlier. You know, we are living in very close to a very oppressive totalitarian state, and these flags symbolize that kind of oppression, and the kind of, you must agree, you must comply, you must conform to this. And that's the symbol that they portray. And so I really hope this application to challenge the planning of these flags succeeds. You know, the government has complained about some flags like this in certain places. One hospital was painted with a massive trans progress flag, and the government minister said that's a waste of NHS money, you shouldn't have done that. And there have been some other cases as well where people have complained about it. And so we're taking this initiative of launching a planning complaint and launching a petition. The petition has literally just launched in the past few hours, but please do sign it. There's a link there that I see my colleagues have put up. Do sign the petition, share it, pass it around, get people to sign it. We have many thousands of people signing this. It will show the strength of feeling against these politicized flags being flown. And it's interesting, it's also an election period, isn't it now? Well, I think we submitted this planning query before the election was called, you know, but it's now an election period, and this is a very politicized thing, really. You must agree with transgender ideology. So I really think it should be stopped.
Yeah, and it's also, I mean, we've had 1,500 people sign it, and it's only been up there an hour or so. So, you know, it's obviously quite popular already, and really worth getting behind, because every signature really actually makes a difference to the planning objection, because it helps demonstrate that these are divisive flags and these aren't things that everyone can get behind and that aren't inclusive. And they aren't inclusive of all people. So that's an extra reason to do it. Just to add to the story, these flags have been shown since 2022, which was the 50th anniversary of Pride, as I understand. And it was a special application for then. They were saying, oh, well, you know, it's a special time. Let's mark this anniversary by doing this. But then it's just come back ever since. So it wasn't just a one-off sort of thing. I mean, I don't think we should be celebrating 50 years of Pride anyway, but it wasn't just a one-off thing. And also we've had them leave the flags up for much longer than they were supposed to be up, according to the planning permission, these sorts of things. So they keep on, I think, breaking the rules and kind of misleading people anyway. So there's a lot of juice to the complaint that we've got against them.
No, certainly. Great, Alan. Thank you for signing the petition. Please do forward and share with others. It's good to see some of these comments coming in. Lena, thank you for your courage. Christians need to wake up in Britain. Britain is a Christian country and find its soul for its survival. Silence in the face of evil is in itself evil. I think sometimes Christians can be a bit hesitant because we think we don't want, obviously there's one sense in which complaining is if we don't speak up, then these things will happen more and more and be more egregious and will get worse. And actually, it's a right thing to love our neighbor, to expose the harms of this, and to oppose it. I think sometimes there can be a hesitancy amongst Christians to fearful of complaining, fearful about speaking about things that are unpopular. But actually, I think there's many, many people in this country who would object to the so-called Pride Progress flag being displayed in the way that it has done. I know we had the kind of mocked up image from the application, but I remember last year being just looking and just it is oppressive, as you used, Tim, and actually it is actually really, really bad. We're talking about celebrating sexual morality, the abuse and mutilation of people because of their mental health issues regarding gender dysphoria. This is what's being celebrated in our streets. I don't think we ever stop to think, what is it that we're actually celebrating? And actually, as Christians, it's, with Paul walking around in Athens in Acts 17, he's grieved in his heart at the idolatry around him. And I think sometimes as Christians, we can just be passive around all the idolatry around us. And actually, it should break us. Actually, it should grieve us and inspire us to speak and to oppose the idolatry, to call people to repentance and to Jesus. So absolutely, we need to be signing the petition, making our voices known, proclaiming the hope and the joy and the life that's offered in the Christian worldview, not the destruction and death that is offered in the LGBT progress movement ideology, which is divisive, is harmful, and is destructive. Great. So thank you all so much for joining today. Thank you, Tim. Thank you, Paul. Please do forward, share, sign, and plug the petition. Send it to your friends, your family, your churches, so that we can make our voices known. If you've enjoyed this episode of Round the Table, why don't you share it as well and click like on the link below. It's been a joy to talk with you, Tim and Paul, and looking forward, Tim, to some of your analysis and Christian Concerns analysis of the election manifestos from the parties and how we can be engaging with that as Christians. If you would like to be equipped to respond and to engage well in this upcoming election season, then do sign up to receive Christian Concern resources at christianconcern.com/hello, where over the next 3 weeks we'll be sending out resources and materials to help you engage to the glory of Christ in this time. Thank you, Tim. Thank you, Paul. Thank you all for joining us.
Cheers.
Come on.